Today is day 30 after the disaster. The canned meat in my hand still tastes the same as always, but to me, it's just another ordinary Tuesday. Everything started early that morning. It was 5:45 a.m., and the temperature was 6 degrees Celsius. On the small 6th-floor balcony of the apartment my mother left me, I was only planning to film the city sunrise at first. The wind blew hard, howling in violent gusts. By habit, I turned the focus ring on my 600mm lens. The smooth, controlled resistance of a high-end lens felt the same as before. The shot in the viewfinder drifted slowly across the city. The streets lay sleeping. The office buildings stood with all their lights off. In the end, as if guided by some unseen force, the shot settled on the city's first people's hospital, the emergency building, 3 kilometers away. Instinctively, I felt something was wrong, because the light and shadows were flickering far too violently. I held my breath, zooming all the way in through the viewfinder. The moment the image snapped into focus, my heart skipped a beat. When I pressed my eye back to the viewfinder, the shot was terrifyingly clear. It was a brutal massacre. This was definitely not an accident. Immediately afterward, a dark red liquid burst outward, splattering across the entire floor-to-ceiling window. Even from 3 kilometers away, I could feel that overwhelming terror as well. I grabbed the camera and rushed into my study, plugging the memory card into the card reader, zooming the photos just taken to 400%. Though the image was slightly blurred, I could still make out the face of the one tearing into its victim. The muscles around his eyes were twisted to the extreme. My hands were shaking badly, still typing in a frantic blur across the keyboard. City hospital. Emergency room. Biting people. The moment the search results popped up, a few of the results included video clips. The timestamps read, 3 minutes ago. The very next second, as I clicked, 404 page not found. I didn't believe it. I refreshed the page, again and again. All the related hot searches just moments ago. Within seconds, all of them vanished completely. In their place was nothing but entertainment news about a celebrity cheating. I leaned back in my gaming chair, cold sweat soaking my back. As a blogger who's been online for years, I knew exactly what this meant. If it were just an ordinary act of violence, the police would have already issued a statement. If it were merely an accident, the video would have gone viral long ago. An internet lockdown on this scale can only prove one single thing. Everything has gone out of control. The authorities are trying to suppress the news. That thing. It's really coming. If this really is like the movies, that means I don't have much time left. Right now, I have less than $15,000 in savings. I can't even afford to own a decent home, let alone building a fortress that could withstand zombies. Aside from this old, run-down apartment, I have nowhere else to go. At that moment, I made the craziest decision I'd ever make. I will sell my prized possessions. I'm contacting a door-to-door buyback service. Cash on the spot. On site within an hour. The price was far below market value, but I didn't care anymore. My hand hovered over the last graphics card. It was a brand new 5090. I hesitated for half a second, then put it down. After all, even if the end of the world comes, I'd still need to play games. With a bitter smile, I took out my phone, all loan apps open. Without any hesitation, I maxed out every credit limit. Confirm loan, confirm, confirm. My phone kept vibrating nonstop. It finally stopped at $55,000. I stared at the number. The corner of my mouth slightly curled into a cold smile. It wasn't much, but my chances of survival were skyrocketing. Fear was meaningless. Survival, at its core, was just a math problem. Basal metabolism, 2,500 calories, 500 kilograms. Carbs, vacuum-sealed rice bricks, 1,800 liters of water. And protein, in an apocalypse, food and water were a harder currency than gold. That was only part of it. The $42,000 in my bank account. Spend every last dollar. That's what it means to stay alive. I made a call to Old Lee at the construction supply market in the next city. No pre-orders. In stock. I wanted the most expensive Class A vault door they had. 10mm solid steel plate. Drill-resistant manganese steel. The exterior was covered with a walnut wood grain camouflage veneer. I agreed to pay 50% more, as long as it was installed at my door by 8 a.m. tomorrow, along with a reinforced steel security gate, installed in the stairwell between the 5th and 6th floors. Watching the balance drop by $7,200 in an instant, I felt strangely at ease. After I hung up the phone, the sun was just rising over the horizon. Golden light pierced through the dark clouds, spilling across the entire city. The streets began to awaken, slowly and cautiously. Sanitation workers cleaned in silence, as if it were a habit that still lingered. Breakfast stalls gave off faint, drifting steam. People heading to work hurried down the street. Everything looked just like any other day. There was even the illusion of peaceful, quiet times. But I knew this calm was only the final afterglow, a brief light before everything fell into darkness. Right at that moment, the first siren sounded. Its shrill cry made my scalp prickle. Not one, but 3 ambulances, tearing down the road like maniacs, driving straight into oncoming traffic, blasting through the intersection below my building. Red lights might as well not have existed. They came dangerously close to hitting a food delivery rider. In that moment, red and blue flashing lights swept across my face. I watched the whole scene with a cold, detached gaze. That was the first trumpet of the apocalypse. On that morning, everyone thought it was hope. Only I knew. It was a one-way ticket straight to hell. The survival countdown had officially begun. At morning rush hour, along the city's primary traffic artery, the flow of vehicles bunches into congestion, transforming into a steel dragon with no visible end. They continue to move slowly, following the familiar order, as if everything were still under control. Right within this suffocating, lifeless traffic jam, a blast of a warning siren tears through the air, drawing closer, instantly overpowering all the invisible noise. 3 ambulances flash their blinding strobe lights, forcing their way through the narrow gaps in the congested flow of vehicles. Pedestrians along the roadside are startled, lifting their heads in unison, but only for a brief moment. This collective numbness toward crisis is sometimes more terrifying than a virus. Right at that moment, a notification from the Health Commission pops up on my phone, completely extinguishing my last shred of wishful thinking. Put bluntly, the sky is about to fall. Because once panic starts to spread, the logistics system will be paralyzed within just a few hours. I have to act before everyone else catches on, turning the money in my hands into survival. In my shopping cart, 20 kilograms of fresh beef shank, 20 kilograms of pork belly, all so that before the power goes out, even if only one more time, I can eat fresh meat. Then come 50 bars of dark chocolate and 30 packs of air-dried beef. All kinds of random junk snacks, piled up like wreckage. I don't even look at the price. When I'm faced with all those tempting calories, money is just a number. Watching my bank balance crash like a waterfall, I actually felt an overwhelming sense of pleasure. Although I could still order takeout, everything had started slowing down. No one was taking the orders. After a long wait, the delivery rider finally called. Through my headset, I could hear him coughing violently. He said the residential compound had been locked down. The order was too heavy. He kept talking, rambling about something, but I couldn't make out the rest. That was enough to tell me the outbreak had already spread to the logistics chain. In the end, I still gave the delivery driver a $40 tip. In that brief moment, I could only stand there and stare. The trending headlines about people biting others disappeared in a split second. In their place were shallow entertainment stories. That kind of manufactured calm sent a chill down my spine. The authorities were still trying to cover up the news. That meant the time I had left to stock up was no longer measured in hours, but in minutes. At 9:15 a.m., the grain and cooking oil wholesale market was already in complete chaos. Business was suddenly booming at an alarming rate. Everyone was buzzing about the flu and the brawl at the hospital. Many people were scrambling to buy the cheapest bulk rice they could find. I didn't have time to squeeze through the crowd, so I showed the shop owner the list of supplies I needed. But he thought I was there to cause trouble. He immediately said there were no workers, no delivery trucks. Everyone was busy. I pulled out nearly $3,000 in cash and slammed it down hard on the table. On a chaotic morning like this, cash still worked better than fists. The moment he saw the cash, his eyes lit up. I held up 2 fingers and pointed toward the back of the warehouse. 2 tons of rice. An adult consumes about 250 grams of uncooked rice per day. That provides roughly 930 calories. That's the bare minimum to stay alive. Based on that calculation, 2 tons of rice, even factoring in a 20% loss to mold, would still be enough to feed me alone for at least 15 years. In a 20-year-old apartment building, the average safe floor load is about 160 kilograms per square meter. As long as everything is distributed properly, even 10 tons of materials would still be well within the floor's load capacity. Anyway, I rented apartment 602 next door a long time ago, so I stocked up on another 200 crates of Span luncheon meat, plus every kind of canned vegetable I could think of. 4,800 cans. In total, $3.50 per can. They'll last for years, as long as they remain unopened. I grabbed the self-adhesive labels I'd prepared in advance and slapped them onto every crate. Heavy-duty light stand counterweights. Precision photography equipment, disguised as thoroughly as possible. Better than nothing. On the eve of the apocalypse, these lies will be more useful than a bulletproof vest. And then there was the mountain of bottled water. 3,600 liters in total. For cooking, cleaning, even treating wounds. 5 liters a day. That's what it takes to live like a human being. The bare minimum for survival. 3,600 liters. Rationed carefully. It could keep me going for years. Each shipment I only put down 30%. The rest, that's up to fate. Next stop, the wholesale market. Prices here have already begun to skyrocket, so I got on the forklift and hauled away to 500-liter chest freezers. Inside, 300 kilograms of frozen meat were already stuffed in. Even though I had already bought a generator, the noise it makes is too loud. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I will not turn it on. So the meat has to be eaten before the power goes out. It'll be my only real comfort in the early days. Next came trade goods and rations, high-proof liquor and cigarettes, 50 kilos of sugar and salt, 50 cases of Coke. That's my happy water, and my last sugar reserve. Next, 400 kilos of bentonite cat litter, because once the water's cut off, the toilet becomes the biggest breeding ground for bacteria. An adult produces over 200 grams of solid waste a day, wrapped in bentonite litter and kept dry. It can drastically inhibit bacterial growth. Trust me, when that moment truly comes, this entire stockpile of toilet paper will be worth 10,000 times more than it is now. Lastly, 20 cases of overnight sanitary pads and dozens of cases of wet wipes. In an emergency, they make the best field dressings for bleeding and sweat-absorbing insoles. Next, I rushed straight to the security and building supply market. The place was eerily deserted, which suited me just fine. I bought 5 large drums of high-temperature lithium grease. This industrial grease is extremely thick and heat-resistant, along with 10 rolls of BTO2 to razor wire. I wrapped them around the outer walls of the 5th and 6th floors, and around the outdoor AC unit mounts. It would be a nightmare for anyone trying to scale the building. Besides defense, I also need an exit plan, because any fortress can fall. 2 Horizon escape kits, 10 gas masks, more than 10 dry chemical fire extinguishers. That's my last lifeline. And if there's a fire even these can't put out, then the only option left is to go down with the building. 11 a.m. I arrived at the outdoor supply store. Even though I already had 3 sponsor-provided portable power units at home, it still wasn't enough. I picked up 6 more, 2 kilowatters each. That makes 18 kilowatt towers total, my own independent power grid, paired with 8 400-watt foldable solar panels. As long as there's still sunlight in the sky, I can still run the surveillance system and the drones. This alone cost me $12,180, along with a full tactical loadout. But I didn't even blink, because I know, in that pitch-black future, those 12 kilowatts of power are the last spark of modern civilization. After leaving the mall, I drove into a dark, dead-end alley. The pharma rep was already waiting. This time, I didn't pull out my phone. Instead, I reached into my inner pocket and took out a small 20-gram gold bar. He took a greedy bite to confirm it was real, and inside that black sealed case were nearly 1,000 boxers of antibiotics, amoxicillin, ciprofloxacin, along with various prescription meds, and over 100 bottles of multivitamins. When fresh vegetables are out of reach, that's the only thing standing between you and sepsis. In the apocalypse, antibiotics are real gold, and gold, for now, is still just gold. 12:16 p.m. The tension in the air was suffocating. The air raid siren wailed without warning, as if reminding me my time was running out. Adrenaline was taking over my body against my will. I had no time to panic. 2 trucks were already parked downstairs, just as planned. This was more than just a barricade. This was what I had put in place before order collapsed. The last window of safety I secured for myself. This wasn't the time for small talk. Money is the strongest stimulant. I didn't need their skills. I needed their brute strength. Before cash turned into worthless paper, I was going to squeeze every last bit of purchasing power out of it. The 18-pound sledgehammer slammed into the wall of Unit 602 next door. I had rented that unit long ago. Now I was opening the 2 apartments into one. Standard red brick walls were too weak. They couldn't possibly support a heavy vault door, so I bolted 10-channel steel along both sides of the wall. Then I ran M20 threaded rods straight through and locked them in place. Now the door wasn't hanging on the wall anymore. It was set into its own independent steel frame. For an ordinary person, this was the most I could do. Hardness alone isn't enough. It needs a shock dampening layer. Anchor rebar into the inner wall. Secure reinforcing mesh. Then seal it tight against the wall with vacuum insulated bricks. Stack it 50 centimeters thick. It'll absorb any impact from outside, and it doubles as my backup food store. As for weapons, at this range, a compound bow beats firearms. No gunshots, no zombie horde. Silence is the ultimate law of survival. Hundreds of cardboard boxes are being carried up to the 6th floor by workers, like ants hauling their food. The boxers are labeled precision instruments and new materials. In reality, they're filled with food, medical supplies, and fuel. In this world on the brink of collapse, the truth can be more dangerous than a lie. 4:30 p.m. The high-intensity labor had begun to wear the workers down. Just then, the ground gave a barely noticeable tremor. Moments later, a dull explosion. It sounded like something had just been detonated. Right at that moment, a video from a local group chat came through on my phone. It was inside the hospital's emergency lobby. A man with his face covered in blood was savagely biting a nurse like a wild animal. Suddenly, the screen flickered. The video was deleted. It looks like they won't be able to keep it under wraps much longer. I put my phone away, forcing my racing heart to settle. The workers were hauling up the last load of supplies. By now, 602 was no longer an apartment. It had become a massive storage space, packed with supplies. The masons were laying the last few red bricks. Once the wall cured, 602 would disappear completely from the building's floor plan. Outside, the police sirens wailed in relentless waves. I turned and walked into the only safe zone. From this moment on, the world was split in two. Outside the door was hell. Inside was my own Noah's Ark. The moment I locked the steel door shut, my whole body nearly collapsed from exhaustion. But it wasn't just exhaustion. It was the kind that hits after you finally feel completely safe. Not until I turned on the surveillance cameras did I see what the world outside had become. The state was unleashing its final wave of suppressive fire, but all I cared about was the core data on my screen. Intelligence from the dark web confirmed it as well. The screams outside the window came faster than expected. In this darkness, who was the prey? The game had only just begun. I tried to tell myself I was a calm, cold-blooded hunter, but it was nothing more than cheap self-hypnosis. The floor rumbled with a deep, low-frequency roar. This wasn't an earthquake. It was the sound of a city with millions of people, convulsing violently before its death. I lift a corner of the blackout curtain. Just one glance. The cheap confidence I forced myself to build shatters instantly. In this moment, the city's night sky has already turned blood red. 1 hour ago, I thought this was just a game. As long as I survived, I would win. But when the entire city erupted in screams all at once, I realized just how absurd my arrogance truly was. The cold lights in the office are the only remaining sense of safety. The live stream windows on the screen are turning into static, one by one. This is the city's old district, 50,000 people per square kilometer. And now, it has become the most efficient meat grinder imaginable. I stare at the shattered door. The frame is warped, the hinges blown clean off. The force of that impact completely exceeds the physical limits of human muscle. They aren't the slow, shambling zombies from the movies. There's no relentless pounding, no prolonged struggle, just a single instant, and the entrance is smashed in. At the edge of the screen, a pair of legs kicked violently a few times, then, like a puppet with its strings cut, suddenly went completely motionless. Immediately after that, a dark, blackish-red pool slowly seeped through the cracks in the floor. I even felt that rust-tinged metallic stench creeping along the network cables and slipping into my nostrils. An ordinary security door was as flimsy as paper. So how long could my welded steel door possibly hold? The signal cut out. The only sound left in the room was my heavy breathing. That feeling of waiting for fate's judgment was even more tormenting than death itself. I collapsed onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. The dust above me shook loose again. This time, the tremor was stronger than before, even accompanied by the roar of engines. They had arrived. Whether it was rescue or destruction, they had all come. Midnight. The real war began. Through my binoculars, a weathered gray armored convoy was attempting to squeeze into a cramped 2-lane road. It was the peacekeeping force stationed in the Special Administrative Zone, ill-equipped and armed with overwhelming firepower. But in the maze of this old district, the heavy armored vehicles were like elephants trapped in an alley, completely unable to establish any firing angles. Mobility was nearly zero. No longer mobile fortresses, now nothing but moving iron coffins. In that moment, I spotted the machine gunner. He made a fatal mistake. The strict rules of engagement locked his trigger in place. He thought it was just a civilian running away. He was still shouting for everyone to fall back. But in close quarters combat at near zero distance, hesitation means death. That pink figure charged forward like an artillery shell and tore open the defensive line in an instant. Modern firearms can indeed crush individual creatures, but in the face of overwhelming numbers, overwhelming speed, and monsters that feel no pain, a gun is nothing more than a piece of firewood. At 12:15 a.m., a few magnesium flare shells shot up into the night sky with a sharp screech, probably to intimidate the enemy. But at the time, it was clear they didn't understand the habits of those monsters, and I got to witness a truly horrifying scene. The monsters struck by the intense light didn't retreat in fear. Instead, they became even more frenzied. The originally chaotic horde of zombies suddenly acted in unison. The hissing roars from tens of thousands of throats at once caused a low-frequency physical resonance. The water bottle on the table bounced wildly. The old building seemed about to fall apart. It seemed that light was not a threat to them, but an unbearable provocation. To get a clear view of the battle, I risked launching the drone. The footage it sent back completely shattered my understanding. From 200 meters up, looking down, this was no longer biology. It was fluid dynamics. A black sea of zombies surged like a flash flood, madly rushing toward the glowing armored vehicles. In this narrow old district, the armored vehicles had no room to maneuver. In an instant, they were swallowed by the Black Sea. The muzzle flashes of the Gatling gun swept wildly in a frenzy. Tracer rounds seemed to slice the night sky apart. But against the density of this zombie tide, the bullets were like firing into a swamp. The zombies in front had just fallen. Those behind were already stepping on their bodies, forming a ladder of flesh, climbing forward. Like a flood, in an instant they engulfed the glowing armored vehicles. They covered the last turret. An armored vehicle tried to force its way out. The engine roared. The wheels spun helplessly in place. But all around it, there was thick, sticky flesh and blood, which left it completely stuck. For some reason, the Black Hawk was flying low. That became its final swan song. The moment it dropped lower, several monsters leaped up, defying physics, and grabbed onto the landing gear. Right after that, dozens then hundreds of helicopters tried to lift it up. The engines roared violently, but the weight hanging beneath was simply too massive. It was dragged down brutally by countless hands. In that very moment, machines were defeated by raw, primal force. An orange-red fireball exploded violently in my pupils. The signal was lost. The drone was gone too. Outside, the gunfire and artillery were still roaring. I leaned against the cold wall. My heart was still pounding wildly. Even that level of heavy firepower had failed. So the bow in my hand, how is it any different from a piece of firewood meant for the fire? An unprecedented sense of helplessness washed over me like a rising tide. 4 a.m. Death-like silence once again shrouded the special zone. But this was when the real terror began. On the surveillance screen, the window on the 4th floor across the street suddenly lit up. That was Aunt Jong's apartment, in that pitch-black city of the dead. Turning on that light was practically suicide. She had just broken the first rule of apocalypse survival, lighting a torch in the middle of the dark forest. The zombie horde downstairs instantly swarmed into the apartment building. That feeling of being stared at by hundreds of zombie eyes made the scalp go numb. A few seconds later, the light went out, only a pool of black blood slowly flowing across the window glass. She was dead, but she had brought the disaster into this building. I switched back to the hallway surveillance camera. On the green night vision screen, the gate that had been deathly silent was now covered with countless hands reaching through the bars, clawing frantically. The threat was no longer outside. They were right outside my door. 6 a.m. Dawn had arrived. The first ray of sunlight sliced across the street like a blade. I thought this was salvation, but I was wrong. When the sunlight hit them, white smoke rose from their bodies. To avoid the deadly burn, the monsters began frantically searching for shadows. Countless silhouettes scattered like a startled swarm of cockroaches. Some squeezed into the underground parking garage. Some crawled into the sewers, and the only deep shelter near me was this apartment building. The door of the red brick building had already been rammed wide open. Something was wrong. Immediately, the external surveillance cameras were pulled up. They were filling every crack in the building. The floor beneath my feet trembled with constant vibrations. They trampled over each other, pushing in desperately, turning this place into a massive nest. Panic made me instinctively want to call for help from the outside. Even a quick glance at the news would have been enough. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands. The signal dropped from a faint single bar to a gray cross in an instant. The information link was completely cut off. Suddenly, a chill ran down my spine, and my instincts screamed that something was terribly wrong. I leaned in close to the observation hole. Sure enough, I saw a guy in a suit. He didn't run in a crazed frenzy like the others. Instead, he stood exposed under the scorching sun. Under the scorching sun, his skin rose in clouds of white smoke. Those gray-white eyes locked onto my position with deadly precision. His nose twitched violently. It seemed he had smelled me. The third morning after the explosion, the air was terrifyingly clear. Bright, clear sunlight poured over the ruins. The pavement was coated in a strange shade of blue, and the sky was beautiful like a cruel jest. I curled up on the sofa, nibbling on junk food. Beside me was a pile of high-calorie junk food, stacked like a mountain. This scene of surplus food felt completely out of place in this hell. In the distance, the industrial noise, with its distinctive rhythm, once again shattered the morning's calm. That was not the chaotic sound of gunfire. It was a meticulously calculated cleanup operation. The moment the camera zoomed in, I saw an utterly shocking scene. Every building in Qinglang had turned into a colorful tombstone. The windows were hung with bedsheets and banners. Red paint dripped down in X-like streaks, with SOS scrawled across them. A few kilometers away, those tiny silhouettes in the distance were frantically waving red flags. I finally understood. why the military had been holding off on bombing the inner city. That was because here a wall of lament had been erected, made up of millions of living people. It was also their final cry to the world. The helicopter skimmed across the skyline at low altitude. It wasn't carrying any missiles. Instead, it was carrying a massive honeycomb-shaped long-range acoustic device. That electronic pulse of sound was as piercing as fingernails scraping across a chalkboard. It made me cover my ears. But to those monsters, this was the call of a demonic flute. The zombie swarm lurking in the shadows instantly erupted into a frenzy, pouring out from every corner, converging into a black river, locked on tight, pursuing the helicopter in the sky. And that helicopter was like a sheepdog, herding thousands upon thousands of zombies, driving them toward a prearranged slaughterhouse. Immediately after, from the coastline, a massive column of smoke and dust rose. Each thunderous blast of heavy artillery, carrying a distinct rhythm, was like shoveling away trash, wiping out large chunks of that black stream of zombies. The military had come to their senses after the chaos of the first night. They initiated the sheepdog plan, using sound as bait, luring the monsters into open ground, and then eliminating them in bulk. It was highly efficient, but also brutally cold, because it meant they would no longer advance into complex residential areas to rescue people. We had already been marked outside the cleanup zone. 11:30 a.m. The ceiling light above me flickered twice, then went out. I sat there, completely still, not even surprised. A few seconds later, the power unit under the desk let out a long beep. The backup power kicked in. Remaining power, 98%. In this dark world, electricity is the ultimate privilege. A while later, the phone screen suddenly lit up. The chat of Building 2's residence group exploded. Over 99 unread messages. Not a single photo of transformed zombies. All of them were frantic probes. Someone's lamenting. No water. No power. Someone's begging for medicine at crazy prices. An old man Wong in 402 tagged me directly. Said he'd seen me moving food into the house. Told me to take some out and share it. Looking at these lines, I just find it funny. Right now, they're not even hungry enough to be desperate. And this kind of moral coercion isn't about survival. It's just the instinct to mooch off the rich. Silence is the only way to resolve it. So I didn't reply. In times like this, any kind of communication is a risk it gives you away. They're not hungry. They're just mean. 5:30 p.m. That tireless visitor is still scratching at the door. I put on my tactical gloves, wrapped them in a layer of velvet. This is not a simple firing practice. This is a surgical operation. Even a single cough could wake every monster in the building. 6th floor terrace. That guy is only 2 meters from me. Muscle memory made me draw the bow instantly. The pulley spun around. The bowstring tightened. The triangular arrowhead pierced straight into his left chest, hitting the heart. But he only stepped back half a pace. I quickly nocked the 3rd arrow. This time, the red dot aimed straight at his forehead. A heavy, dull thud. The sharp arrow pierced through the skull. He went limp like a machine that had been powered down, collapsing instantly, falling to the ground. Not a sound remained. With a single thud, the heavy safe door locked shut. I sealed myself off from that insane world once more. 6 p.m. dusk. It should have been a beautiful, magical moment. But now, through the observation slit, it wasn't a lovely sunset. Instead, a thick red light spread across the sky, like coagulated blood. The radio kept tirelessly repeating the same words. Survivors, please remain silent. Await rescue. The ground shook slightly. It wasn't artillery fire. It was the roar of engines. I saw a small convoy of several Humvees racing desperately down the empty main road. Just then, someone, as if seeing a savior, rushed into the middle of the road, trying to stop this convoy that symbolized hope. But the convoy didn't slow down at all. It roared past him, leaving in front of him nothing but red taillights fading farther and farther away. 2 seconds later, the relentless black tide swallowed that desperate figure. Not even a single scream had time to escape. My face showed no emotion. There wasn't the slightest ripple in my mind either. Maybe they were just carrying out what they called the most rational damage control strategy. We had already been pushed out of the civilized world, looking at the fully charged power units on the shelf, softly glowing. I knew this silent abundance was the only salvation. 8 p.m. Darkness had fully fallen. Outside the barred gate, on the 6th floor, the man I had shot through the forehead still lay there, utterly motionless. There was no grotesque expression, but the calm didn't last long. From the stairwell came the sound of dragging footsteps. Several new visitors appeared. At first glance, they looked like a group of neighbors, exhausted from working late. Then, in an instant, they swarmed in tight, leaving no gaps. With their backs to me, they completely blocked the body on the ground. They were feeding. It suddenly hit me. I had made a mistake. I thought I was clearing out a threat, but in reality, I was serving them a meal.